Welcome, everyone. And today's guest is the amazing Amy Demas. And you've probably all heard of her before. She's an orthodontic consultant, and her company's name is called Communicate Excellence. And she has a really interesting philosophy, which is all centered around the idea that excellent communication is crucial for converting inquiries into loyal patients and truly fostering a positive trust-based relationship right from the very first interaction. So let's get started. Hi, Amy. Thank you again for joining me today. I so appreciate your time and energy.
Oh, thank you. Great to be with you, Lorraine.
Thank you. So I just introduced you and told everybody all about your company, but the last time I met you, you told me about your journey to this
Mm.
point in your career, and I was utterly fascinated, and I'm pretty sure everybody else will be too. So please fill everybody in on how you ended up in this particular position.
Well, the end point definitely had a starting point that I never thought this was going to be the trajectory. So I first went to United States Military Academy after high school. I was on the 10-year anniversary of women being allowed in was when I entered. So I'm in that first 1,000 women ever went. Now I did blow out my knee, so I did leave after 2 years, but I finished my degree elsewhere.
Mm.
Mm, a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. So I've got that engineering mind, which you think, how does that fit to communication? I'll get there. So I have that degree and I worked in a petrochemical consulting company designing pipe runs for petrochemical piping.
Mhm.
Just think braces on a large scale. Really big braces with expansion loops and stops and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like orthodontia is a little bit inbred into my mind of what I like. Well, I did that for a while, and when I had kids, I then homeschooled my kids.
Mhm.
And so I love helping light bulbs turn on for people. So you're seeing a connection there.
Yes.
Well, after homeschooling and I became a single parent, I needed to provide a way to support myself, and I got my MBA, and I ended up working for Bank of America, or as we said, the bank. That's the way we referred to it there. And I was fortunate enough to get involved initially into the image engineering area. So nowadays we don't even think about it. We used to get our checks once a month at the end of the month.
Back in the olden days, I'm old enough
Back
to
in
remember that.
oh my goodness, back in the olden days. Well, one of the reasons you don't have to do that anymore is because we work from images. And I'll say, you're welcome. I was in that department helping to design that for you. And then went on to cash products and other ways. And so that's why I have, at last count, 56 US patents from process design around cash and
Amazing.
check products. Well, while I was there, I got a life coach and she introduced me to this Dr. Don Demas.
Mm.
We started dating long-term relationship, a long distance relationship for 4 years until my kids got done with school and I moved up here to Connecticut as we got married.
Mm.
And then I worked in his office,
Mhm.
sat at the front desk with the only knowledge I had was that my child had had braces. I didn't know anything. So starting from scratch and worked my way through each of the admin positions, which was not on my radar
Mhm.
either, especially the treatment coordinator, because I said, I'm an engineer. Engineers aren't salespeople.
Right.
But when your husband's the orthodontist and the treatment coordinator is out at the last minute and it's five
Yes.
minutes till go
Yes,
time,
indeed.
yeah, you get to be it. And I found I was effective. So that's what I thought I was going to do the rest of my life. I wasn't supposed to be here.
Mhm.
Well, 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And the type of treatment I had just knocked me on my back and was out of work for a period of time. And it was as I was, after a year or so of recovering, that I got the opportunity to develop a program for especially front desk people and their phone skills.
Mm.
And so what I did was to take what I was learning. So I used those engineering skills. What's the 80/20? What's the low hanging fruit? Develop that, but also personalize it because I always want to say, would I say that on the phone? What can look good on paper can sound not authentic in real life. So
Yes.
I'm trying to blend in my company a way that gives a systemized approach that still sounds authentic to each individual.
Mhm.
So that's my story. It's quite winding, but you can see how each of the parts build on the other.
I think for me, I think most of the time when you, and I certainly this, I speak from this experience, is that when you end up in a position,
Mhm.
especially at our age, and I'm probably older than you, at our age, and you're loving what you're doing, it's because first of all, it was meant to be. So we can talk, we can set that aside. Who knows why that might have happened. But on top of that is that you learned your strengths and your weaknesses. And what I also love about your story is that you did all of the jobs inside the practice. So
Yeah.
the idea of advising or even hiring for those positions is you've already done it before. And
Yeah.
so I think you've ended up in a consulting company out of it just fits so perfectly with who you are as a person, right?
Mhm.
And I think that even, beyond just going to school and learning how to do it, it takes your entire company to a different level,
Yeah.
because it's out of passion, it's out of strength, it's out of knowledge, and that's incredibly powerful. So kudos to you. And congratulations, right, on
Thank
getting
you.
to that part of your career where you're just swimming in happiness, right?
Thank you. And one of the other things that's unique about being married to the orthodontist as the consultant is, as before we even got on, there are days where if at a last minute they need help in the office, I have gone in. So I've sat in that TC role, sat at that scheduling
Mhm.
coordinator role. And so I don't lose contact with our audience.
Yes.
What's it like to hear it firsthand from them? Because sometimes we can get so far removed from our target audience that we forget what's important to them.
That is so interesting, Amy, because that was one of when we were sitting down to have a chat.
Hmm.
I wrote this question, which was that what we deem the patient needs to what the patient perceives that
Hmm.
they need
Hmm.
many times are two different things.
Hmm.
And again, similar to the conversation we had before we went live, was many times we think a patient should know something. As let me give you an example of an experience I had recently.
Okay.
So recently we did some like educational videos for patients.
Hmm.
And one video talks about when you get your fresh new retainer and you put it in your mouth, here's what you might be experiencing. And
Okay.
you think to yourself, well, patients should know that, right? They've worn a retainer before. They know they haven't probably worn it in a couple of weeks. They should know it's going to probably feel pretty snug. Now that is, we're taking for granted that we understand what the patient knows and feels and needs, right?
Hmm.
But really, in reality, having done this now for 5 years, specifically for Retainers for Life, is we got those calls over and over and over again, going, it's so tight, it's so tight, it's so tight, until we realized that we needed to get ahead of that in our education and
Hmm.
our communication, and because we're delivered at home, in gaining the trust of the patient, so that when the retainer goes in and it's feeling snug, that it's okay, right? So
Yes.
that is a really good example of us, the difference between perceiving what the patient perceives they need
Yeah.
and what we deem they need when it comes down to communications. Would you agree with that?
I would. And I love that because of what you learned from what you were hearing. Yeah, you've got to get ahead of it because then it's not a surprise. When they're calling you as such as it's an emergency from their
Yes.
perspective, we can say that's normal, but it feels it's after the fact. Whereas ahead of the time, it is normal to
Mhm.
feel that.
Yes.
Same thing happens in the orthodontic offices, and we've got to remember what it's like to not know.
I love that.
Yeah.
That should be the title of this.
There you go. True, because I'm sure you've read about the curse of knowledge. And the tapping experience that you have from the song, that one person knows the song, the other person doesn't, and we start tapping it. Well, in my head, I know it. And it's like, is it not obvious? And we can almost come across with that, and we're just doing it harder and harder and
Yes,
more intense, like,
yes. And
and
louder.
and louder, which is portraying you're doing it, and you would be hearing in your ear, idiot.
Yes, yes,
And we don't
exactly.
want the um, perceived idiot to ever be
Yes.
heard or felt.
And I think as an employee or as a staff member, it's frustrating, right? It's
Mhm.
frustrating that you're now again, I have to say it again. So that's no fun, even from a practice perspective, to have to repeat
Yeah.
only for it to go in one ear and out the other. We get to hear this every day. It's like, I didn't know I have to wear my retainer to bed every night. Like, but we know that they were told that, right?
Right.
So even in what we do, and many times the corporate side of orthodontics and the practice side of orthodontics are different. I have never lived and breathed in the practice
Mhm.
side, but in this scenario we're the same, right?
Mhm.
Because we need, again, coming back to your original point, was we need to understand the patient. And
Yes.
when we can make the mindset shift that they don't know that when they get a bigger wire, it's going to feel tighter,
Right.
right? They
Right.
don't know that. They don't understand that. But if we can speak, we know it's coming because we've experienced it over and over again. If we
Right.
can speak to it before we even get there, they go into these situations within treatment fully prepared.
Yes. And I always say we need to use everyday examples for them. Because again, even if we're trying to get ahead of it, if we're using our words and not their examples, it's not going to have relevance
Mhm,
either. It's just
mhm.
it's so important to take the time and remember what it's like to be on their side, to not be the expert. And to your point, you said you were making videos, which I love because we do get tired saying the same thing.
Yes.
And it's an easy reference that they can point to that's exactly the way we want
Mhm.
it said.
And that speaks volumes to today's world, right?
Hmm.
Is that there is a balance between using technology
Hmm.
in our practices and in our companies, balanced with I need humans. And
Yes.
sometimes the two come together and it's not good. So I'm a absolutely dislike bots. Don't like
Yes.
a bot.
True.
I don't want you to make me press one for this or one for the two for this and put me in a loop. I'm a very impatient person. So I need a human to answer the phone. So a lot of what you do is you work with the front office staff, right?
I
So tell
do.
me a little bit about that.
Well, as to my business, I do. I listen to recorded phone calls, and it really goes back to what we've been talking about. It's so that we can hear both sides of the conversation.
Mhm,
It is so we can learn the normal trends and behaviors of your front desk person that you're trying to
mhm,
provide feedback on.
mhm,
My goal is to gain that trust. And as I listen to so many calls, I like to say I listen to over 15,000 calls a year, a lot of phone calls. I get to know their voices,
mhm,
which means I get to celebrate their normal bandwidth. And then when they have something that was like out of ordinary great or like, oh, that was a tough one, I can sit there and I've got their trust to hear the backstory.
mhm,
The backstory may explain it. I even had one today. I was like, wow, are you guys not doing XYZ? And they're like, yeah, we do, but there was a certain scenario behind it. I'm like, thank you. The
mhm.
backstory helps explain. It doesn't excuse, but it helps explain. And when we allow our team members to be able to hold that backstory with someone safe, we
Yes.
gain their cooperation for better, more growth.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Had lots of webinars all about empowering your team
Hmm.
and allowing them to make mistakes because they're great learning opportunities. I mean, how many
Oh,
times have we heard that?
yeah.
And maybe you've seen it on LinkedIn, on everybody's posts, and everybody's talked about it. But in reality, when it happens, And, I went away to Italy a few weeks or a few years ago, and there was a couple of problems while I was gone. And by the time I got back, everybody was just losing it. And we went through, I realized that I had to empower my team, first of all, with tools to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and empower them that if you make a mistake, let's have a conversation about what went wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
and come up with possible solutions all on their own. And now they're capable of doing those things, and I can go to Italy for a week.
Good for you. When's the next trip?
So that is very powerful. What would you say is the most common mistakes the front office staff are making?
It's finding the right balance in communication.
Mm,
So this is something that I've taught for years, but then as I follow several different people, they put into words what I was doing. I'm like, oh, that's it. Vanessa Van Edwards really puts great verbiage around communication. And it's built off of 50 years of science that it's made up of warmth and competence.
mm,
And what I find one of the most common mistakes is we get it backwards.
mhm,
We're putting competence or I say guidance when we should be polite, and we're doing polite and yielding backwards when we should be guiding. Classic example, if you followed anything from what I say, is how do we open and close those calls?
mhm,
That's where you have to have the warmth, the politeness, glad to help, have a great day. Those little things that are missing, especially the beginning, they are missing. And then we get to the part where we're supposed to guide, and we're like, when do you want to come in? And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And we're bending over backwards in this customer service way, and we're
yeah,
not being air traffic control. So it's the cross signals
mhm,
that I see as most common. Now, if I were to ask anyone, they know the right answers.
mhm,
Yes, I should be polite. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I always do that. Or, oh, yeah, I do that.
mhm.
But when you hear the recordings, all of a sudden you go, oh, there's a gap. It's almost
Right.
like we did before we got on here. We're like, it's like showing a mirror and you go, oh, you know, and now it's not me saying somebody said they heard you say, it's I'll play one, play another, play another.
Yeah.
And now it's not, I'm not the one saying it. It's here. Now, how do we close the gap or celebrate that you're already doing it well?
Mhm, mhm. I like that you use the word science, right?
Mm,
Because I think all too often we think about communication skills as just part of being human, right? But there really is science behind communication
mhm,
skills. And I read an article recently, don't even ask me where, but I do a lot of reading when I'm not
mhm.
supposed to be doing it. But it was all about nonverbal communications, which was very
Yes.
interesting to me. Is that something that you cover when as part of your company?
I do. We because we're doing more face to face in a treatment coordinator scenario. When I'm working with treatment coordinators, we are talking about micro expressions and what they
Mm,
can notice, and
that's
I point
super
them in that
interesting.
direction. If you want to find out more about that, get Vanessa Van Edwards' book Cues, Cues.
Excellent.
Cues, Cues, Vanessa Van Edwards. She also has great email series and website. So throwing that out there again. But you can still notice the same things on the phone,
Mhm,
even without visuals. You're picking up on it with your ears
mhm, mhm.
audibly. You
Yeah.
can. It's like the difference between if I were to say hello versus hello.
Mhm.
You're getting a cue of what's happening
Yes.
with that. So yes, we do speak to that.
I think that's amazing. One of the things that they had wrote about was even just the process of just sort of leaning in,
Hmm.
especially if someone's concerned. And so they talked about how it was showing a care and listening. And I
Hmm.
really liked that. Or if someone was upset, even just sort of touching their arm lightly,
Hmm.
in that I'm connecting with you. And I thought, wow, isn't that just fascinating how powerful a light touch to someone's arm could be? And
Absolutely.
that's where we talk, that's the science behind it, and how really the science of how our brains work, right?
It's so true. Even I had read an article. We're talking about articles we haven't looked at right away.
Mhm.
fMRI, so that when warmth is done before competence, we're ready to receive that.
Super
Which
interesting.
is why, doctors, when you go into a room, you need to lead with warmth before you show that you know what you're doing.
Hmm.
Because our brains are wired scientifically. First, friend or foe, are you for me or against me?
Yes.
And then are you able to do what I want to do?
Hmm.
I need to be able to relax and trust in you and then demonstrate it to me. So even in small things like that.
I think that's amazing, Amy. One of the reasons that I have built our customer service in a very specific way here at Retainers for Life is because I really had a bad experience during COVID.
Mm,
And I went to see a new family practitioner that had a glass enclosure in front of his front office people.
hmm
And they left me standing there for quite some time. And as I said, I'm from Ireland, so I'm very polite. And I stood there very patiently, waiting for them to pay attention to me.
hmm
A knock. I didn't want to say hello because she saw me very clearly. And eventually, when she answered, pushed the little glass piece to the side and said, "What do you want?" And I thought, well, if a patient's standing at the glass at the window, I would like to check in. Oh, you don't need to check in. I know you're here. And I remember thinking to myself, this, I've not even met the doctor yet, and already I'm never going to come back to this practice. Now,
Yep.
that is an extreme example, but it can work. So after that, I went in, met with the doctor, and just because of what I do for a living, I
hmm
explained to him my experience from a non-upset perspective,
Right.
just so you know. So the point that I'm making is many times our doctors don't know,
Right.
because you don't want to be the patient that comes in and
Mm.
says, "Are you kidding me?" Right? Do you get to experience that? Is
Oh,
that something that our orthodontists are not like even knowing it's happening?
absolutely. And it's more than just a negative experience. It can just be a blah
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And you need to have feedback. I mean, how many systems do we have in our practices, in our businesses, that we've got a feedback loop to say, was it effective? Meaning to a practice, are you making money? Are you collecting money? You have
Mhm.
all these systems and you're checking in on them.
Mhm.
Why are we not checking in on communication and how we are presenting ourselves to our patients and to our potential clients?
Mhm. Now, do you recommend that all conversations at the front desk are recorded? Is that one of your recommendations?
Absolutely. Everyone should have, especially these days with the technology, it makes it so easy.
Mhm.
If you have voice over IP, the capability is already there. If you don't have a licensing, get it. If you have digital service, usually it's a layer of licensing, get it. Not only is it for training purposes, as you hear, this call may be recorded for quality assurance and training purposes, but that quality assurance is for protection for
Mm.
both patient
Very
and
interesting.
yours. There's that he said, she said, which the patient can be saying, your person told me this, and you're wanting to confirm. And it could also be your team member is saying something and they're saying you never said it. It's one way of checking back in, either for quality assurance, yes, for the he said, she said, and for the feedback loop. Where can we get better? Because sometimes some of our most challenging calls are when we can learn the most.
Mhm.
For example, you know, we all will get a humdinger of a call. It could not, it may not even be our fault. It's just the person, whatever. But you have one of those calls and you're like, it just goes south and you can't recover it.
Mhm.
I love it when there's been enough trust and they feel safe enough with me to say, Amy, I had a call. What happened? It was at this time, and they pull it, and we actually do like a post-mortem on it.
Yes.
That's when you know you've broken through because they're willing to trust you in their most vulnerable. And a lot of times that's where they learn the most. And it's a lot of times a turning point in how they address any and everything.
Mhm. It's one of those things where, what you do goes well beyond just being polite. Of course, it's the science behind what you do. Do you have methodologies that you use whenever you go into a practice to sort of do an evaluations? Maybe step someone who might be interested in hiring someone like yourself. What does that look and sound like?
I like to do a training first. And what I originally used to do was a training and an observation day. But what I find is I do it better when there's observation from recordings. So when we go into coaching, because then it's not the person standing over the shoulder and they're on the best behavior. I want them in their relaxed, normal environment. And the
Mhm.
calls are being recorded in the background, and I pull a random sampling. I'm getting their real life, everyday interactions that are going on, as opposed to, ooh, she's standing behind me. I better be really good.
Right. Yes.
So I have found that using the technology that we have is actually best because I get what's happening when nobody's looking.
That is amazing. Do you think that a lot of the teens, when they sort of hear that the doctor hired someone like you, that they automatically get their back up? Or
Yes.
I'm sure you have a way of being able to come in and just sort of calm everything down. But it would make me think that that might be a barrier for you.
It can be because we had this idea that a lot of times they're bringing it in because we're wrong, and that consultant, that teacher, that coach, whatever, is like that English teacher with the big red marker, pointing out everything that is wrong. And what I like to say is, you're bringing in a coach, and with Olympic year going on, who do you get a coach for? Not the one who can't perform, but the one who has the nuggets and the parts that are good, and we just want to put it together and make it even better. So I like to say it's because you are worthy that you're getting this investment. And that really helps to just turn down that apprehension that's going
Mhm.
on. Also, when I say, and because I use recordings, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm not trying to humdinger you into a phone call and give you trick questions with one phone call. And it's like one at bat and you swing and a miss. And yeah, you're awful. No,
Right. Yeah.
I'm trying to learn who you are overall, to the point that there are times when I've worked with somebody and I'll say, how are you doing? The last couple weeks of together. And
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was hard. I'm like, okay, because it was a little different, just even in your hello and your greeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm there for them and to be their advocate and their mentor and to raise them up. And it takes a little bit to break through their anticipation of it,
Mhm.
but I try to do lots of little things to help break down those apprehensions up front.
And at the end of the day, I think it makes for a happier staff member, right? It's like you have someone that's not coming to work every day, sort of just dreading the phone ringing, right? Because they've just had to repeat and the frustration and over again, but they weren't able to get out of that loop,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So again, it speaks volumes to bring in someone like yourself in that really can lift the team up.
Hmm.
I think that that's really amazing. And I think even what you do goes beyond just, and how obviously the phone is answered. If you're doing it all correctly, you'll get that return on investment in that people are turning up for their appointments, right? So
Exactly.
it even goes beyond that,
Yeah,
just simple
absolutely.
communication.
Well, and when I'm working with it, we're talking about all types of communication,
Mhm.
not just the one new patient phone call that is absolutely important if they never get in, but the experience of being in treatment lasts a lot longer
Yeah.
than only the new patient call, the new patient experience. And
Mhm.
you want it to have been a good experience all around,
Mhm.
all throughout. So it's so important to do all along.
Now, we also touched just briefly on technology. So,
Mm,
a large part of what we do at Retainers for Life is we have a system in place that puts videos in front of the patient at specific times. What is other technology? We'll call it the future orthodontic practice look like when it comes to communications, maybe using technology, not using technology. What are your thoughts there?
Well, you've hit on a big one, that is using video communication, because anytime we can use the audio and visual, it has much more impact that only what I can read with my eyes or what I can hear with my ear. When we
Mhm.
can put the two senses together, it's a lot better. We are such a society that is so YouTube driven. If I need to find something, I Google and YouTube it on there. So you providing videos ahead of time that are already there. When I want to find out about it, I can get to it, as opposed to waiting for
Mm.
the next day your business is open. So
Mhm.
I think incorporating and enveloping the video component is so much more helpful for them to find it right as they need it. Plus, you know, think about the win-win that gets. Yes, they can get their information, but if you have these, within your website on a YouTube channel, you're
Mhm.
also driving traffic right back at you on your website to be found by the next person.
Mm.
So that's just one of those things that we need to think. But here's my but. But to the point, we don't want to go to the frustration point of what you said, the bot. Because
Yes.
we put this, it's an interesting, it's a balance of these things. Because, as I said to you, one of the things that science and research says about excellence is it's got to be easy, which makes us think in that technology area. It's got to be enjoyable. Okay, so not frustrating, but it's also got to be personal. And so sometimes easy and personal leads us to the high touch, the human and the able to self-serve. And it's got to have both.
I think similar to the conversation I had with you about Grant Cardone and the
Hmm.
10X guy, and he said, just put yourself out there, get
Hmm.
on video, make the videos, don't be scared, just do it. And I think that we can use that analogy also for our doctors, because many times we're asking doctors, just record it. And they're like, oh
Yes.
no, I don't want to get on video.
And it's personal. It's like one of the things I do for teams before I go out is a week before I show up, I do a Loom video. That's to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Get your caffeine, get you that, because I want them to see I'm a person before this name, this presence that comes in. Uh, but now I do it for each office, so I re-record it for each office, so it has their name. But I could make it generic. Hey, I'm so excited to be with you, and I've avoided the name.
Yes.
I'm going to be there in a week. Make sure you do that, and I can have a generic one. And that's what we need to encourage our doctors, just like you've made those videos. It would be great, like a Janelle Baum does, is make an individual video for everyone and on Loom, and you can see that it's been watched. If not, just make a generic one.
Yes.
Doesn't and sometimes the less produced it is as an
Yes.
introductory one, the better.
Yes. I agree.
It's personable.
Yes, absolutely. We are human.
Right.
We care about what we do. We love what we do. The idea of constantly needing to be perfect, I think it needs to go out the window.
Right.
And I get to live and breathe that world in these webinars because I'm far from perfect. But yeah, we highly encourage our doctors to make videos, even right down to saying a new patient video saying, I've set an hour of my time aside just for you.
Right.
That even that has been very powerful for our onboard doctors, for the patient to get before she even walks through the door.
And then they have a face that they recognize because sometimes our websites don't match who we are. And
Yes,
you know, drop that URL link, which is why I like Loom, because you drop the URL link in your practice management system text reminder with the link and done.
yes, absolutely. Well, all too often, with any company, they make lots of promises
Yeah.
and then you join and you think, what have I done?
Hmm.
And I've had so many experiences just like that, that I refuse to build a company like that. If we're going to say that we're going to do it and we're going to commit to doing it, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it with excellence.
Hmm.
I think that this is really amazing, Amy, and I appreciate so much you taking the time with me today. I know that you're a busy woman, and thank you again. I
Thank
hope that
you.
everybody watching gains some value from this.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Always a pleasure to be with you.